All right, here we go. Hey, what's up, guys? It's ex-Morgan with My Spiritual Life. And today I have my good friend Sadie Jensen. Oh, excuse me, Sister Jensen. Thank you for being here, Sister
That's
Jensen.
awesome.
Sister Jensen is an ex-Mormon and also a hypnotherapist, which, if you didn't know, I also am a certified hypnotherapist. So it's super random, but we have a lot in common being ex-Mormon hypnotherapists.
Yeah, that's so true.
Sadie, thank you for being here today. I am so excited about this video.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was such a good book and I was excited when you invited me on, so it'll be good.
Hell yeah. All right. So, basically today I'm calling this video book club because we're going to be talking about the book Codependent No More. And primarily the reason I wanted to talk about this book is I feel like high demand religions tend to create really codependent people. And if you don't know what codependent is, if you've never heard that term before, I'm going to get into that definition in just a second. But reading this book, I just read this book a couple months ago, Codependent No More by Melody Beattie. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce that. There you go. And probably it's not gonna. Oh well. Anyway, it's in the description below. Anyway, I have really wanted to talk about some of the things that I learned from this book because I feel like it helped me a lot to understand myself better and to find ways that I could think in a more healthy way and have healthier relationships. Like, I guess that's a good overview. Yes. So before we get started, I'm going to give you guys kind of a little bit of an overview about what the book was about. And basically, Melody, she struggled a lot with substance abuse. She kind of got involved in those like 12-step programs. And kind of in that realm, she started to notice like a lot of patterns between people who were like dependent on a substance like alcohol or drugs and like them having what you would call like someone who's like enabling it, you know? And essentially in her journey, she started to realize that there was a lot of issues that she had that was kind of like making okay, sorry. This I'm like trying to like there's so much trying to basically she noticed that there is an unhealthy relationship between people who have like these substance issues or even mental illness issues and the people that are like trying to like fix them, right? So like a lot of her book talks about that, but specifically the stuff that really helped me in her book was understanding that if you experience a lot of childhood trauma, you're not going to know who you are. And if you don't know who you are, you might try to live through or by obsessing over someone or something else. And I found that to be very true in my life. I feel like because of the situation I grew up in with my mom, I found that I was very insecure, that I didn't have a strong sense of who I was or right or wrong outside of like Mormonism. And that made leaving Mormonism really hard because Mormonism was kind of like my saving grace in a way because it made me think that I did know who I was when really I didn't. So it kind of like tricked me into thinking that I knew who I was. Anyway, Sadie, do you have any comments about that intro kind of so far?
Oh, definitely. I would agree with everything that you said, that like going through so much childhood trauma and excuse me, and being raised in Mormonism, I feel like we don't know who we are or what we want or really the direction that I guess our lives should, or not should, but that we want it to go, I guess. So yeah, just that I agree with everything that you said. It's and there's so much content in this book that is so good. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh, one thing to mention too, because I highly recommend the book for anyone raised religious or anyone that just had any kind of dysfunctionality in their childhood. But I will warn you, Sadie reminded me actually earlier today, the book has a lot of stuff about God in it because she, found a lot of help through going through a 12-step program. And if you're familiar with the 12-step programs of like recovering, addicts and things like that, you'll know that God is like a big part of it. For me, the God stuff wasn't really a big deal. I always just kind of like set it aside because it didn't like to me, it didn't like personally apply. If it applies to you, great. If not, throw it out. I still think her book is filled with like tons of great advice for if you're looking to try to be more independent, to figure out who you are and what you want, to let go of bad habits. I feel like it helped me with all of those things. And just understanding yourself, which is just so important. I'll read this comment really quick. I read this 10 years ago, and this feels like new knowledge. I had some childhood trauma, and I've struggled with who I am. I completely understand and totally agree. And so I hope you enjoyed this video because we're gonna be talking about some of the things from the book that helped us. And depending on how much of the info we get through, maybe we'll make a part two. We'll see how it goes. Um, I'll a little bit more of a recap over the book before we get into it more. The way she defines codependent is a codependent person is one who lets another person's behavior affect him or her and who is obsessed with controlling that person's behavior. I'll read it one more time. A codependent person is one who has let another person's behavior affect him or her and who is obsessed with controlling that person's behavior. Another way that I like to define it is by saying, like, you're not okay. Like, if you're struggling with codependency, you're not okay unless this other person is like with you or maybe is telling you the things that you want them to tell you, or like that kind of situation. Yeah. So as we're going through this book and talking about this stuff, remember that I will say that I feel like this can be triggering stuff, especially for us people who struggle with codependency, because we're very we get shame triggered really easily. Like, oh my God, I'm such a bad person because I exhibit whatever, And it's like, no, you're not a bad person. Maybe you're a codependent person because of things that happened in your past, but that doesn't make you a bad person, and hopefully can give you a launching pad to understanding yourself better or maybe other people in your life. So disclaimer there. No guilt, no shame, right? But of course, it's gonna happen, and just don't let it stop you from living your life. Okay, so she
One
talks
thing
oh
to
yeah,
go
yeah,
with that.
please.
Sorry.
Go
One
ahead.
thing
Go
to go
ahead.
with what you said is when we were talking before in another conversation, we said something like, who am I without this other person? Or who am I without even circumstances? Like, who am I without this alcoholism or this, I don't know, like, who am I without
Yeah,
this
like
big
it could
problem
even
in my
be
life?
like a bad, yeah, like a bad habit or a bad like identity. Yeah. Yeah.
Or who am I without Mormonism? It could
Yes. Yeah.
be whatever, So, yeah,
Yeah, that's funny because yeah, we were codependent with the church in the sense that like we didn't feel like we were okay without it. Like, I need this thing in order for me to be okay. I need this person in order for me to be okay. I need this thing to work out a certain way in order for me to be okay. And yeah. So this is good. I think this is a good like introduction to codependency if people have never heard of it. Um I want to think of like an example, and it could be like you'll notice with an example she uses in the book that I think is pretty relatable, or at least common enough that you can understand it, is like, let's say you have a wife who's married to an alcoholic, right? And he's got issues, right? And she's trying to fix him, right? And she has such a low self-esteem that she will settle for the bad behaviors that he's exhibiting because she's more worried about being alone than she is about the way he's treating her. So like that codependency is very toxic, right? Because if she keeps rescuing him, he may start to think that he can just get away with whatever, get away with not having to change, right? With not having to better himself. And then on the flip side, she is going to struggle with feeling resentful and frustrated and stressed out because she's trying to fix someone that maybe doesn't want to be fixed, right? And the reason that she might be doing that, kind of like what Melody says in the book, is that because she doesn't know who she is or what her own issues or problems are. And so it's easier to latch onto someone else and try to fix their problems, right? It's a coping technique. It's a weird fucking coping technique. And I've done it a lot in my life. So, yeah, so I think, yeah, just being aware that if you grew up in a high demand religion or experience like a dysfunctional family growing up, you may struggle with feeling like you are wanting to control people or wanting to control circumstances that you may not actually be capable of controlling, and maybe you're not even like aware of that. So I want to read a little snippet from the book that I think is really good. And basically, in her book, she gives some kind of like what I'll call symptoms of someone who is codependent. And so identifying with these symptoms for me was very triggering, but also very helpful because it helped me to put into perspective like, oh, that thing I'm doing is actually not healthy. And here's why. And here's a better way of, handling the situation. So I'm going to read her kind of little introduction into like some of these like symptoms that she lists. So this is for those who are interested, it's chapter 4 in the book. It's like the second paragraph is where it starts, and it's a little bit long, so please forgive me. Before I list the things codependents tend to do, however, I will make an important point. Having these problems does not mean we're bad, defective, or inferior. Some of us learned these behaviors as children. Other people learned them later in life. We may have learned some of these things from our interpretation of religion. Some women were taught these behaviors were desirable feminine attributes. Whether we learn to do these things, wherever we learn to do these things, most of us learned our lesson well. Most of us started doing these things out of necessity to protect ourselves and to meet our needs. We performed, felt, and thought these things in order to survive, emotionally, mentally, and sometimes physically. We tried to understand and cope with our complex worlds in the best ways we knew how. It is not always easy to live with normal, healthy people. It is particularly difficult to live with sick, disturbed, or troubled people. It is a horrible happening to live with raving alcoholics. Many of us have been trying to cope with our outrageous circumstances, and these efforts have been admirable and heroic, and we've done the best that we could. However, these self-protective devices may have outgrown their usefulness. Sometimes the things we do in order to protect ourselves turn on us and hurt us. They become self-destructive. Many codependents are barely surviving, and most aren't getting their needs met. As a counselor, Scott Eagleston says codependency is a way of getting a need met that doesn't get a need met. We've been doing the wrong things for the right reasons. And just a little bit left here. Can we change? Can we learn healthier behaviors? I don't know if mental, spiritual, and emotional health can be taught, but we can be inspired and encouraged. We can learn to do things differently. We can change. I think most people want to be healthy and live the best lives they can, but many of us don't know how. Many of us don't understand what we've been doing that hasn't been working. Most of us have been so busy responding to other people's problems that we haven't had time to identify, much less take care of our own problems. Many professionals say the first step toward change is awareness. The second step is acceptance. With that in mind, let's examine these characteristics of codependency. And before I get to the list, I want to read a couple comments here. And to add to that, codependent behaviors seem natural in the church. Examples: thinking of others, serving others, teachings of you'll be, happier when serving others. A mission, no identity whatsoever in serving others 24/7. Thank you for these comments. So on point. Like you can totally see how, like, for example, with Mormonism, you have this, like, I feel like especially with the women, it's this like really toxic, like, I just sacrifice everything to give my husband and kids the best life ever, while internally they're not living a happy, well-balanced life, right? They are resentful, they are on the edge of burnout, they are overwhelmed and exhausted, and they just but they think that's how they're supposed to be. They think that's the only way to live or the best way to live. And I guess I feel like that was how I lived for a long time, and I'm grateful for books like this that have showed me there's a totally different way to view the world, to view your relationships, and to view yourself. Sadie, did you want to add anything before I get into the list?
I feel like when you were talking about control, like controlling other people, it's kind of funny. Sorry, my mind goes back to that because when you said that, I was like, I don't know, it resonated with me. But it's funny how you're raised without any control. And then I feel like in my life, I didn't even realize that I was trying to control people and situations. And because I think in a way, because I felt so out of control in my life, and so like I never could choose. I never had the opportunity to like say, this is what I want for my life, and go in that direction. Do you know what I mean? So I guess I would try to control and micromanage all these little things, like my husband. It's kind of crazy thinking about that.
Yeah.
And anyway, it's just funny how we do things without even realizing that we're doing it.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I think it's hard for when you're insecure, when you struggle with codependency issues, it's hard for it not to bleed out all over everybody, like, that you're close with, that and you may not see it, but when you start to see it, it is so hard to look at, because I know, like, I did a lot of fucked up shit to Jared, like, emotionally. Did I mean to? No. But like she says in the book, like, I was trying to survive. I was trying to get my needs met. And so that in the past sometimes would come out as very, very manipulative, And I'm glad that I've gotten to a point where I can at least, like, have enough compassion for myself to be like, okay, I was hurting and I didn't know better, and now I do know better, and I'm trying to do better every day, but I don't know for sure, but I imagine codependency is probably like a lifelong kind of battle, because it's just constantly like reminding yourself to look within and fix your own shit instead of getting distracted with everybody else's shit, right? That's a big part of it. Anyway, yeah, I think for me, the name of the game in trying to combat a lot of my unhealthy things I learned from my parents is to be compassionate and patient with myself, and then to say, like, I choose to do better. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, that's awesome.
Okay, cool. So I'm gonna read this first bullet she has in this chapter 4, because I think it's like very all encompassing. And so it says codependence may, right? And this is trying to give you an idea of like, if you are like a codependent person, like, and you know, again, her definition is kind of different than some other people's definition, but even like, I feel like even just using the word insecure, if you're an insecure person, I feel like this is pretty synonymous. Anyway, she's saying they may exhibit these things. You may or may not exhibit them. You may know some people who do, but I found this very eye-opening for me. So, codependents may think and feel responsible for other people, for other people's feelings, thoughts, actions, choices, wants, needs, well being, lack of well being, and ultimate destiny. And I remember still when I read this the first time that it really hit me very deeply. Like, and the word that stood out to me the most was destiny, because I am definitely someone who tends to try to fix everyone in my life. And I'm trying to get better about that. But what I've seen is that I take on all this weight, all this pressure of like everybody's problems, of everybody's issues, relationships, whatever, even their destiny. Like, I will get stressed out on other people's behalf on like what college classes, you know, they're trying to take or whatever, you know what I mean? And it's quite the double-edged sword, because in one sense you can pretty easily distract yourself from your own shit while delving into other people's shit. But then dealing with other people's shit is so exhausting. But as a codependent, for me at least, it's felt very compulsive. Like, it's almost like I can't help but be stressed out about this person's problems. And I'll get more into that. But yeah, I don't know if you had any comments about that, Sadie.
Yeah, like absolutely. It's funny you say that because I totally do too. Even like who people chooses as life partners and stuff like that. Well, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's like, oh,
Right.
you're with that person or you're breaking up with that person or like, and the word destiny also kind of reminds me of like the highly religious people that do try to control other people's way of life, but not only way
Yeah.
of life, but where they're going. And you know, and they think that they know what's best for other people and where they're going to go. And so they try to insert like you have to do X, Y, and Z in order to get to this place, this heaven or whatever. And it's, you know, they are trying to control people's lives and you know, their ultimate destiny, which is, you know, we've all lived through that, you know, so it's hard. And we've all done it probably too.
Right,
you know?
right. Well, that's where we learned it. So
Yeah.
man, it blows my mind, because I think like I keep having these moments in my life where I'm like, yeah, like I have my shit together. Like, I know what I'm doing. And then like I read something like this and I'm like, well, I have my shit together more than I did yesterday.
Right. Me too.
And it's hard, right? But it's a continual journey, and I'm not ashamed to admit that. I'm not ashamed, you know, to admit that that it's hard recovering from such severe insecurity. And
Right,
yeah. So I think one of the things that really stood out to me, I want to get more into this list too, but I'll just say this for a second, is this book points out that it's like you will set this up in your mind. You will set it up that you're the only one that can fix this other person's problem, and that you know better, and you really know better, right? And I'm like, and she's talking about that, how you will convince yourself that you know better than everybody else. And I'm like, but I do know better than everybody else. So you are wrong, Melody. And it's just funny because I'm like, it's been very humbling for me because I mean, this has been a journey for me. It's this healing and everything. It's been years, right? But it's still humbling to me to remind myself that even though I've learned a lot, that doesn't mean that I know what's best for everybody. But here's the catch too, is even if you are right, let's say you know what's best for this person and you are totally right, it doesn't matter. Because if they don't want your advice, they're not going to take it. So, and that's one thing to keep in mind too, is that even if you're certain that you're right, that doesn't mean that you should be trying to fix other people's problems. And like, it's one thing if they come to you for advice and they want your opinion, but most people do not. And yet I am very quick to give people advice whether they want it or not. So, I am a recovering codependent. Okay, so I'm going to read some more of these codependents may list here. They may feel anxiety, pity, and guilt when other people have a problem. They may feel compelled, almost forced, to help that person solve that problem, such as offering unwanted advice, giving a rapid fire series of suggestion, or fixing feelings. Okay, I already have to comment on these because that for me is, I mean, it's exactly what I was just saying. I feel like that guilt, right? That guilt is what gets me. I have this guilt, like I'm responsible to fix this person's problem. And especially if they come to me with their problem, then I feel all that much more responsible for it. And it's been really helpful for me over the last couple years and couple months to continually remind myself that I need to let go of that guilt, because me rescuing people is not always what's best for them. And that's something that this book really helped me with, is that even if you're right and you know what they should do, sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is to let them dig themselves out of their own hole. Because if you are rescuing them, you're kind of sending this like subconscious message that you don't trust them to figure it out, first of all. And that can be harmful in itself, because it's like, I mean, I'm sure you all have met like one of those mothers that's like, her son's like trying to like pour a bowl of cereal, and she like swoops in and stops him because she doesn't want him to spill like just like a little bit of milk on the counter, And it's like, that's not helping that kid, right? That's not helping that kid learn how to pour milk. And the truth is, you have to pour milk a lot of times to learn how to not spill it, right? But it's the same thing for like emotional and relationship issues too. Like you have to deal with a lot of shit to get good at dealing with your shit. And so if people are constantly rescuing you, or if you're constantly rescuing like someone in your life, you're not giving them that opportunity to learn from their mistakes and to grow and to become better. Yeah. And for me, it's simple enough to say, okay, I won't help this person, with whatever issue, because like I need to let them grow. But then the guilt comes in, right? And that guilt will just eat you alive. And that's where it gets really tricky, because it's simple in theory, but it's hard in practice, if that makes sense. And so I think for me, getting to the root of that guilt has been like realizing like, oh, I don't feel like I'm good enough. And that's why I feel like I have to prove myself. And the easiest way to prove myself is to go fix everybody else's problems. So,
Right.
Good times.
So one thing that kind of reminds me of is I have a mentor who would say, I'm not coming to your pity party. And he would like, at at first I was like, ouch, like that kind of hurts, you know, like it came across kind of rude, but he would say, you know what? I will hold you in your power always. I will hold you higher than you hold yourself. And even when you're in the depths of these problems, these issues in your life, that doesn't mean that you're not strong enough and you know, you are strong enough, you're smart enough, you are enough to figure out your own way, and nobody else can guide your way. Well, we can guide, we can help, but nobody can choose your way or, you know,
Yeah.
experience that for you. You have to, otherwise you won't progress. And it's interesting that like I won't go to your pity party. I'll be here and I'll listen to you and I will help if you want it, but also holding people to that standard of um it's okay to feel that way, and also you're enough to get through it, and you know,
Yeah.
have that faith and that belief in people and their power to be able
Like,
to come out of that.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like, yes, instead of thinking the best thing I can do for this person is to fix their problem or like hand them a solution, the best thing I can do for them is encourage them to find a solution themselves. And that's
Right.
super cool. And honestly, I wish more people did that for me as I was growing up instead of trying to rescue me. And because like I had, you know, people in my life growing up that I feel like their tendency was to rescue me, and it made me feel like someone that needed to be rescued. And it was hard to break out of that mentality. Um, yeah, that's so cool. You know, and I feel like in the last couple of years, you know, I've been wrestling with this a lot and breaking a lot of codependent, you know, relationships and things like that. And I one thing that I've noticed as I look back over my life, I notice how good it felt to find really broken and needy friends. And I did this a lot, especially in high school. And I would find these like broken and needy friends because I think for a couple reasons. Two are coming into my mind. One is because I felt like I could rescue them, right? And it gave me purpose and it distracted me from my own problems I was dealing with. But the other reason too was that needy friends give you so much reassurance because they just need you all the time, and you're like, wow, like this person really likes me. You know, I don't have to wonder what they're thinking about me. When you're insecure, that feels really good, but it's not healthy, right? And it's something you become addicted to in a sense, because if you have low self-worth, you're looking to fix that low self-worth through someone else telling you that you should feel better, but it only works temporarily. Um like this comment, if you let your kids pour their own milk. Oh my god, I love it.
That's
Oh my
awesome.
god. That made my heart so happy. So another reason that I think I kind of sought out needy friends is because I felt like they could never abandon me. And I'm like, you know, these people, they're too hurting to ever abandon me. It's like I would make myself so quickly a necessity for them that they couldn't, you know what I mean, not need me. And so that feeling needed felt so safe to me because then it felt like I couldn't be abandoned. But then on the flip side of it, I ended up just with a lot of hurt feelings and a lot of broken friendships because eventually I couldn't handle the weight of these people's problems and trying to fix these people that, you know, didn't want to be fixed, right? Anyway, that's just some reflecting.
Yeah. It's like it kind of reminds me of like I can be or I cannot be your crutch, but I could be your cheerleader. You know what I mean? Like, I want people to feel their feelings and know that it's okay, like perfectly okay to feel angry or feel sad or feel any kind of way they do. Like, it's okay to feel that way. And also know that, but what, like, I guess, like you said, of just holding them like to what they can do for themselves and letting them,
Yeah, by
allowing them to
believing
do
in
that.
them.
Yeah, believe
Yeah, and then
in them. Yeah.
oh man.
And
It
be
is
like, be their cheerleader for them, you know, like celebrate them and celebrate their wins. And
yes, yeah,
uh
and point out their wins because sometimes people don't see when they're winning. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
and I know that was really helpful for me, especially like in therapy and stuff, where when they, she would point out to me, like, oh, hey, like, even though you're having a hard time with this, like, look how good you did with this aspect of it. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I totally wouldn't have done that in the past. Like, that's so awesome, And that
Yeah.
helped, that really helps. Um, shout out to Chaz, ex-lldm. I freaking love the ex-lldm community, so shout out to you. All right, I'm gonna read some more of these because this seems to be like a good launching pad. So these are more of her like symptoms of like a codependent from this book we're reading, Codependent No More. Anticipating other people's needs, wondering why other people don't anticipate your needs. Finding yourself saying yes when you mean no, doing things you don't really want to be doing more than your fair share of the work, doing things other people are capable of doing for themselves. Oh, there is so much to talk about with that. Anticipating other people's needs. I don't know why, but it's like it feels ingrained in me. Well, I know why. It's because of the relationship I had with my mom growing up, where she struggled a lot emotionally, very, very much. And in her struggles and not knowing how to deal with her struggles, she often made me or my other siblings responsible for her issues or her reactions. And that led me to believe that I was just in charge of everybody's emotions and everybody's reactions and everybody's just everything. You know what I mean? Sister Jensen, do you have a sister?
I do, actually. I have
don't
a
know
few
if
sisters.
I don't know if this person was here earlier, but I did introduce her as Sister Jensen. So, so that was very on point, very on point. Anyway, I'll read a couple more of these. They don't know what they want or need, and if they do, they tell themselves what they want or need is not important. They try to please others instead of pleasing themselves. They find it easier to feel and express anger about injustices done to others rather than injustices done to themselves. Um what is LLDM? It is a cult in Mexico. I've got a whole series on it. If you want to check it out, you can click on my channel. I even have like a little playlist for it. All right, so I think for me, not knowing what you want, or then when you do know what you want, then just like minimizing it was a huge problem for me. And I think it's like a worthiness thing because I just felt like I felt so insecure. I didn't feel like I deserved to have my needs or wants met in the past. And it was hard to convince myself that I did. And so even like if I knew like a certain thing was like would be good for me, it was hard to get myself to do it initially. Yeah, hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah. So one thing that comes up for me with that is like when you're not living your life the way that you want to, whether because you know what you want and you're not able to do it because of exterior circumstances, or you don't think you are, or you just have no fucking clue what you want, right? And because I think that is actually really prevalent. I think a lot of us don't really know exactly what we want, but I think that that unhappiness of not living your life in the way that you want is sometimes what causes those really unhealthy habits like alcoholism or addictions or whatever, um, or even just being a codependent to those people, you know.
Yes, yes.
And then another thing that you said about, oh crap, I can't remember. I think it was I don't know. Sorry. I thought of
Oh
something
no,
and
you're
then
good.
it
It'll
just
come
left
to
me.
you.
It will come, yeah.
It'll come. I love what you said, like it's a prevalent problem that we don't know what we want. And I think that it's because of a couple things. First off, I think that for the most part of like our upbringing, we were told or we surmised what we were supposed to want. And that's part of it. And I know another aspect of it for me was I was so busy feeling like I was responsible for what everybody else wanted that I didn't even know how to look within and figure out what I wanted. I didn't even know how to like contemplate it. But then also there's this fear of like, what if I look within and I find out what I want, but then I can't get what I want and then I'm just going to feel disappointed. And I think that can be a pattern from our childhood of like, okay, so I have this thing that I want and maybe my parents shut it down, right? And then I start to learn wanting is just painful because it's just disappointing because I'm not going to get the thing that I want. And that's where you have to kind of like separate yourself in your mind from like your child life and your like adult life and be like, I've had this mantra I've said for a while, and I've said it less as I've gotten to a better headspace, which is cool, but it was, I don't live there anymore, right? Because even though I'm an adult living in my own house, have my own family, my brain is still living in my childhood home in a lot of ways. And that is hard to deal with. So I have to like physically remind myself, like, no, I actually don't live there anymore.
I love that. That's awesome.
I had a comment. Morgan, was your mom acting like you were the adult? How old were you? I mean, it happened a lot throughout my childhood. Basically, I was the second oldest of 6 kids. And so in a lot of ways, like my parents relied on me in ways that I feel like were excessive to the point. And it's hard for me to know how much of this was me internally, like taking too much on, and how much of this was them maybe putting too much responsibility on me. But I did feel a lot of resentment around feeling like I was having to help raise my younger siblings instead of focusing on my needs and wants. And that was hard. I mean, just being a kid in a family that big is really hard. Um, Most of you who are ex-Mormon might also be from really big families and get it. Oh. Yeah, so finding out what you actually want as an adult is kind of difficult when you've never done it before. But I literally, I've talked about this a lot on my channel, just literally been backtracking. I think growing up in a high demand religion will cause this too, of like, you are so busy living the life you feel like you're supposed to live, you don't really spend any time discovering how you might actually want to live or who you might want to be. And I think some of the best ways of discovering that is to start with trying to be as honest with yourself as possible about what you like to do and what you don't like to do, and kind of going from there.
I think another
Yeah.
good, sorry, I don't mean to
No,
interrupt you.
please. No,
I
you're
think
good.
another good part of that is like, I think asking yourself, why do I want this thing? Because I feel like sometimes we think we want something just because we think other people want that for us, or it's kind of an expectation of somebody else. Like I wanted to be a mom because growing up in Mormonism, that was where my worth and value were tied to. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
How many kids you can
absolutely.
bear. And so it's kind of like, I don't know if I ever really consciously thought about that and like you know, it's just kind of funny going in deeper and actually figuring out, is this my want or is this someone else's want? And why do I want it? You know, and really getting in touch with that part of it too, I think is kind of cool.
I think that's so important. I'm glad you pointed that out. It's like that, it's the same curiosity you should approach leaving a religion with, right? It's that same idea of like, okay, um, do I believe in God? And if I do, why? And if I don't, why? You know, it, and then like, okay, do I want to be a mom? If I do, why? If I don't, why? Like being curious. And I think I saw this, I've seen quotes kind of about this where it's like, life isn't about becoming, it's about unbecoming what you were taught to be so you can be who you were meant to be. And I've heard a lot of quotes kind of like that. And I think it's super helpful to view it that way because I think so there's a lot of ways you can measure success in life, right? You can measure it with money. You can measure it with, you know, your career. You can measure it with how many friends you have or how many lovers you have or like whatever, you know. There's a lot of ways you can measure success. Personally, I've been thinking a lot about how I want to measure success in my life, and I think it's by being as authentic as I possibly can be. And I think that that is a good measure of success for me personally because it makes me think I'm living my life in a way that's as meaningful as it can be instead of living in someone else's shadow. And when I mean someone else's shadow, as a kid, we have all these fears instilled into us by our religion or by our parents. And if we don't take a second to kind of figure out if those fears are legitimate or not, we might live our whole life in someone else's shadow, like avoiding something because someone else is afraid of it, right? And that's not how I want to live my life. I yeah, so anyway, long story short, I like what I was trying to say there is I think you can do yourself a massive favor by getting curious about your beliefs and your wants and trying to get to the bottom of why and allowing yourself to kind of deconstruct from things that maybe you felt like were a part of you just because you were kind of told they were supposed to be or should be a part of you. Or they were just ways for you to try to fit in, right? Because we want to fit in so bad.
Right.
So bad.
And, right.
Yeah. Okay, this comment that was so deep about getting disappointed as a child. Yeah, I felt like that was really real for me for sure. I think other people can relate to it as well. And yeah, and then you carry it through so you don't want to be disappointed again. Disappointment hurts. But you know what else hurts? Wasting your life. And we don't want to do that. And so I think that's why I enjoy reading books like this. I enjoy having these conversations. I feel like it all challenges me and it shows me more and more who I really am. And it's like fucking scary, but also like it's the adventure of your life. You know what I mean? Like no one wants to live their life in a bubble of someone else's fear. They just don't. I mean, it feels really cozy, kind of, until you put it in that perspective that we don't know what's going to happen next. And I think a lot of us kind of, you know, after leaving a religion, you wonder what's going to happen after you die, and you don't know. All we know is that we have right now, and like, how can we make the best of it?
Right. Awesome. So another thing that I was just going to add quickly to that is a lot of times why we want things is for the feeling that it gives us. Like, why do I want friends? Why do I want this? Because it gives me a feeling of acceptance, of love, of being worth something. And oftentimes you can actually get that same feeling from other sources. So it's interesting because even if you do run into something that you don't think you can get, if you really dig down deep enough and figure out why you want that thing, chances are you can receive that same feeling that you're chasing in another way. So, I mean, that's
And
just a
hopefully a
thought to keep
healthier
in mind.
way too, if you're
Yeah.
getting it from like an unhealthy place or whatever. I'm so glad you brought that up. We want something for the feeling we think it's going to give us, right?
Yeah.
Like I remember like talking about this with a therapist like a while back, and talking about how, I was stressed about money, and like, why is money so important to you, and like, why do you feel like you need, X amount of money or whatever. And it was really interesting when I got to the root of it to realize like what I wanted to feel was freedom. Freedom from decisions that were really stressing me out. And I'm like, holy shit, when you get to the bottom of it, it's like, I didn't even like, yeah, money is great. Fucking love money. Everybody can send me money. It's great. But like, it's so interesting when you get to the bottom of it and you realize like sometimes, I think most times, like we want something external. It's really an internal thing that we're looking for, if that makes sense. So I'm so glad you brought that up, Sadie. That is a brilliant point. And I think specifically with like related to codependency, like I wanted my mom's acceptance. I wanted her support. I wanted her unconditional love. I wanted her validation, right? I wanted all those things. But really, what did I want? I wanted to feel good about myself. And I thought getting those things from her would make me feel good about myself. And the truth is, I don't know what could have happened, but from what I've learned, it's like you can get that from someone else, and it's like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound, right? It might like feel good for like a second, and then you're like, but I'm still bleeding. And then you need that validation, and you become like addicted to it. Like, I need I just saw the sticker thing. Morgan needs money. That's true. Awesome. Thank you very much. Oh my god. You become addicted to that validation, right? And the only place where you can get it, where it doesn't become addictive anymore, is internally, right? So you got to get real with yourself, and you have to learn ways to comfort and love and accept and validate yourself. And that is hard to do when you don't know how to do that. But I think it starts with just those little steps of trying to encourage yourself, trying to be compassionate with yourself, and trying to be patient with yourself. I think for me, a big piece of it really was compassion. Like, okay, I fucked this thing up. Maybe I don't need to like destroy myself. Maybe I just need to tell myself like, wow, you were having a hard time. So yeah, you yelled at your kid or whatever, and also like, let's not spiral into self-hatred, because that's not helpful, because I am a human being that is always going to make mistakes. I heard this one quote. I think I told you about Sadie. Okay, so you always hear from your parents, like, I'm gonna, there's nothing you could do that would make me, what is it? I'm gonna mess this quote up. There's nothing you could do that would make me love you less, right? You hear that from parents. And I heard this cool quote, I don't remember where I heard it from, where this guy said, what you should add to that too is that there's also nothing you could do that would make me love you more. And that, first time I heard that, blew my mind. So not just emphasizing the like, I won't love you less, but I also won't love you more, because what you're telling that kid is that they don't have to earn your love. And in fact, they can't earn your love, right? Because they already have it. And setting that up and like, okay, over time, I think you always love people more, right? That's just normal. Like, but this is such a powerful thing for a child to internalize, I imagine, because for me, like, I felt like I was trying so hard to earn my parents' approval, to earn their acceptance so that I could feel good about myself. But if instead the notion was, oh, well, it doesn't matter if I get an A on this test, mom isn't going to love me more, like she, then all of a sudden my energy can be diverted to like, what do I actually want to do? What do I actually want to accomplish? Instead of me trying to hustle to prove myself, maybe I could actually expend energy focusing on being more authentic and discovering my own personal passions. Yeah, so that was a big fucking deal for me.
Yeah, that's huge. That's so huge. I love that.
So I'm gonna read a couple more of these. This this one is a doozy. Oh, actually, really quick. My stepdad said unconditional love is not love. I'm scared to ask what the conditions are. My stepdad said unconditional love is not love. I'm scared to ask what the conditions are. Huh. Well, that makes my brain want to go on a sidetrack, and I might go on a sidetrack for just half a second because I think you can love someone unconditionally, but also not be around them unconditionally. So I don't know in what context your stepdad was bringing this up. So I have no idea. But I know Jared, I always love him. I think I always will, my husband. But like if he started sleeping with all the dudes in the neighborhood, like would I stay with him? No, I would not. um and but I also think that separating yourself from someone behavior wise doesn't necessarily like change the way that you feel about them. Like I think you can love someone but also like feel like it's not good for you to be around that person. Does that make sense? Do you agree with that or disagree with that?
I agree with that. I think that they won't take it that way though. Does that make
Oh yeah.
sense?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that like if you
Um
loved me, right? That's that. If you loved
yeah.
me, you would let me cheat on you.
Right?
Like, oh yes, yes, you're right.
It's
Yeah.
funny because my parents show conditional love all the time. And it's really a very deep philosophical rabbit hole that you could really go down in the conditional and unconditional love. Some might say, is it even possible to love somebody unconditionally? And some might say, yeah, because there's conditions to everything. But I think it is possible. I think there's going to be a lot of things attached to that, though. It's just
Yeah.
a really deep rabbit hole. It's funny because my mom was on the phone with me and she's like, I decided that if you answered my phone call, I would send you a birthday present. And if you didn't answer this phone call, I wouldn't. So I'm going to send you a birthday present. And my first thought was, that
Ooh.
is such conditional love. Like, that is hilarious that you say that. And
Spicy.
yeah, spicy. Like, and my parents are always showing just like the very most conditional sort of love. And like, I guess it is up for debate of like, do they really love you unconditionally and they're just showing conditions, or I don't know. That's
You
I
know,
think that that's a debate for ever. For the times, I
yeah.
guess.
Okay, I like that point because okay, I think the closest you can have, let's say unconditional love exists, or maybe it doesn't exist, but the closest you can come to it is certainly through your children, right? Because
Right.
it's much easier to love a child unconditionally than like a spouse, I think. And I think okay, so the example you brought up, like, okay, are they really loving me if they're putting conditions on it? I think that they probably do care about you, but I think they're trying to control you. And like, okay, if someone's trying to control you, do they love you? I think a lot of times they just don't know better. And like what okay, so what I'm thinking from my own experience and what I've seen too is that okay, you have someone who is being manipulative. They're trying to control you because there's a certain thing that they're trying to get out of you, right? Or get from you. And if they don't feel like they're going to get that thing, they're going to try to manipulate you, right? And so I think it's just their own unhealthy way of trying to get their needs met, right? And so in that sense,
Okay.
like maybe they're not capable of unconditional love because they're always putting conditions on it. I don't know. These are just my thoughts. So I think it's really interesting though.
Another way to like look at it is, are they withholding love when they put conditions on it? Like, you will do this, or I will do or not do this? Is it a
Yeah.
form of withholding love? Is it a form of, I don't know, I guess, but it's like so relative because it's like, how do you feel love? Like, how do you feel love? Or you could say, is it an action of love or fear? Like, is it expansive or contractive? We could go into that. Like, it's just so relative.
Dude, that is so
Or,
interesting. I like that you pointed out that whole, like, people will do that, they will withhold love when you don't do the thing they want you to do. Because I saw that a lot in my childhood, and then I did that, and, like, in my marriage and with my kids, and, um, it's so it's so interesting to me, like, and you know what's okay, so I think we don't realize how much we cope by trying to control other people until we really think about it, right? Because in here, one of the things it talks about, I don't know where, because I don't think it's on this first list I'm reading. It talks about how, like, we will say things, codependent people or insecure people will say things, like they will word things a very specific way to try to get someone to respond in a very specific way. And I'm like, holy shit, like I've totally done that in the past. Like where I'm like I'm wording something different for one person than I would for another based off of like what kind of thing I'm wanting to get out of them, and how that is so inauthentic, right? And having compassion for myself, like there's this fear of not getting my needs met, right? There's this fear of like being abandoned. There's a lot of fears involved in that kind of compulsive action. um but like it's so freeing the more I just let people think what they want and feel what they want and focus on myself, right? Because where I'm at right now, I'm really proud of myself because when me and Jared got married, I was 19. I was just barely 19. I was super young, super insecure, and I just made him my whole world. And it was really bad for both of us because then both of us couldn't find ourselves, right? Um, but I think that it happened on both ends for a reason. I think for him, like maybe it made him feel like important and like a purpose, and for me, like it made me feel like I was getting my needs met and feeling like I had an identity, like I was Jared's wife. Um, but now I've gotten to a point where I'm secure enough in myself that I'm like, if Jared said to me today, like after I wrote this video, he's like, peace out, like, see ya, I'm gonna go bang all the dudes in the neighborhood. I would be like, it would fucking suck, right? It would be really hard. But I have the total confidence in myself that I would be okay, that I would manage it. It would suck. I'd be really sad. It'd be really hard, but I would manage it. And I have a lot of belief in myself now that I'm a good partner and that I could find someone else that could appreciate that if Jared decided he didn't appreciate it one day. And anyway, I don't remember what got me on this tangent, so I can't remember if there was a different point I was gonna make. But basically, uh dealing with these insecurities is really hard. But the more that you can go within and feel secure within yourself and let go of what other people think of you, the better you're going to feel and the more autonomously you're going to live. And then you're not going to be so afraid of people leaving you, and you get to be more yourself because you're not afraid of what happens if you accidentally be yourself and someone doesn't like the you that you're being. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, I think that's a really beautiful way of living your life and looking at it. And I love that you gave yourself grace. That's awesome. It's so good.
Shout out to Thuggy, who is a Patreon supporter. Thanks for being here. What's up? Anyway, there's a couple other bullets here I'm gonna read. Oh yeah, we're doing okay on time. We got some time. All right, a couple bullets here. They feel safest when giving. They feel insecure and guilty when someone gives to them. Yeah. Yeah, those both really have been a problem for me, especially in the past. Like it feels good to give to people, right? It's part of that, like I'm proving myself, I'm proving my worth, like I'm making this person like me more or whatever. And then like if someone were to do something nice for me, it would make me feel bad. Like I didn't deserve it. So like you doing that makes me feel guilty because you're doing something that I didn't deserve. And so then I feel bad that I got this nice thing or whatever, which is just so toxic, right? It's so, and it sounds so silly, like when I say it out loud, but it's a part of that, bad conditioning that a lot of us experienced, whether it was in childhood or through our religion.
Yeah. I feel like it's kind of funny because the first thing that pops into my mind is like if somebody buys my lunch or dinner and then it is this instant guilt feeling like, oh crap. Now it's almost like I'm in debt to them. Like it's almost like now next
Yes.
time we go out, I have to pay for their meal. And then it's funny because there's this almost internal dialogue in the back of my mind, and I have to give myself grace for it too, because I mean, I'm human, but there is sometimes this like, wouldn't it just be easier if we just paid for our own meals? Because then we wouldn't have to do this back and forth trying to like courtesy thing. Like, oh, I owe you a dinner. You know what I mean? But it's hard
Yes.
because it's really my own insecurities, and I should just be like, accept it and be grateful instead of,
Yes. Oh, I
feeling
love
in
that.
debt.
I know what you mean. It's like it's a twofold problem because it is this awkward, like, is this the expectation that's being set that like we trade off? Like, because I don't know if I'm cool with that. Like, because what if we go to Texas Roadhouse next week and you order
Right?
like an 8-pound steak and then I'm supposed to flip the bill? Like, and it's like
Right.
it's too much projecting because it's possible that this person is just doing a nice thing for you, right? And it's like we can't even just like believe that. Like maybe they're just doing something nice and I just like can't convince myself that's what it is. But there
Right.
is also this like social awkward kind of like game that people play where it's like, no, I'll get the bill. No, I'll get the bill. No, I'll get the bill. And it's like, it's just so like, to me, it's just like so fake. But like, it's also like, I think people just like, they feel like they're supposed to do that, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
I don't play that game. I just like if they're like, I'll get it, I'll be like, okay. And then they're like, fucking
Cool.
bitch. And I'm like, I know. Don't offer to pay for it if you don't mean it.
Right?
Dumbass. No, I'm just kidding.
Right? I know. It's like, hey, you offered.
Uh,
Yeah.
oh man. Let's see. Oh, this is interesting. Your community mocks and ridicules Jews, Catholics, and Mormons. What community are you creating? You seem to want followers to allow you to support your lifestyle and support your narcissism. I don't know what community I'm a part of. I love to hear what community you think I'm a part of, but I'm certainly a fan of appearing narcissistic if it means that I'm actually not being a people pleaser anymore. So no, I'm not a fan of narcissism, but I do think that I was on the very opposite end of the spectrum where I was a people pleaser and my feelings didn't matter, everyone else's feelings mattered, blah blah blah. Anyway, interesting. All right, let's read a couple more of these mother truckers. Find themselves attracted to needy people. Find needy people attracted to them. Feel bored, empty, and worthless if they don't have a crisis in their lives or a problem to solve or someone to help. Okay, so I really like the whole like finding themselves attracted to needy people or needy people attracted to them. I kind of talked a lot about that earlier in the video. Basically, there's a lot of benefits of being friends with needy people when you are insecure, right? But then I love this feeling bored, empty, and worthless if you don't have a crisis or a problem to solve. I definitely have struggled with that in my life. Like sometimes it's like the more I get my shit together, the more I'm like depressed, at least initially, because all of a sudden I feel like I've taken all of this chaos and organized it. And then I'm like, I kind of think I learned to thrive in that like survival mode to the extent that I almost don't know how to just like thrive. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's almost like there's this pressure that you have to be healed. You have to be a certain way now that you've organized your chaos, or I don't know, you can't struggle anymore. And then it is kind of
Yeah,
depressing because it's like
yeah.
I'm still struggling even though I feel like I have so much of my shit together. I'm still having a hard time just internally with, I don't know. That, and I think that it's familiar being in crisis mode. Oh, speaking of, I
Yeah.
actually uh one of the things out of the book that I really thought was cool was oh crap, I have it in my notes.
Oh, you're good.
Um
You're good.
being in a crisis and being almost addicted to the crisis, and also making small things a crisis because we're so used to that
Being in a
lifestyle
crisis.
of being in a crisis. Like we've dealt with so many traumas throughout our lives that something pops up and automatically our mind goes to worst case scenario or a crisis mode. And yeah, that's a really interesting thing that some of us do sometimes, you know.
I think that was definitely a pattern I learned in my childhood where it was like you're supposed to be freaked out all the time. Like you're just supposed to be stressed out. Like that's just what you're supposed to do. Like if you're a good mom and you're a good wife, then you are losing your fucking shit all the time. And I think it's hard to pull out of that. So it's like you say, it's like you said, we will make little problems into way bigger than they are just because we're used to like that environment.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a big part of it. I don't know where my note was on that, but I think I basically covered it. Just I think we're so used to being in that crisis mode that like something, you get a phone call from the school or you get pulled over and immediately your heart starts hammering and it triggers that crisis
Right.
mode even though it might be something super simple and not a big deal, you know?
Oh man, that's so true. I feel like I really in my childhood I had this foundation of like you said, the school calls, right? And you just like your brain automatically goes to the worst case scenario. And it's like you can't help it. Like it automatically goes there. And I think in part, I wonder if the reason that we do that is because we're trying to prepare. Like, and that's
Right.
like the best way we know how to prepare is by like if this is the worst case scenario and I'm prepared for it, then anything else I can handle.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's
Like,
funny that you say that because I was talking to my husband about this like yesterday, and I was like, it's almost like we are preparing ourselves, and our mind does go to worst case scenario because if it's better than worst case scenario, then we know that we can handle it. And so
yeah,
we prepare
yeah.
for the worst because we're like, it can only go up from here. But the funny thing is I think what we're really doing to ourselves is making ourselves live through the worst case scenario when, you know, that isn't necessarily necessary, you know? I mean, we could take it as a calm demeanor and like, oh, it's probably not a big deal. But then there's that fear of, well, what if it turns into a big deal, you know? What if my world blows up? But I mean, what are the chances? I guess that does happen, but I
Yeah,
think you know,
it does
we're
happen.
it's bad
Yeah,
because we're
it does
living in
happen and we're
crisis mode all
totally
the
ready
time.
for it.
Yeah, 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 and I mean, but then you'll never get out of that crisis mode if you're
Yeah.
always living the worst case scenario, which is something I struggle with. So,
Man, I guess like the thing that helps that to get better, right, is that I can handle whatever comes, right? And that I think maybe that's what we're afraid of. We're afraid we're not gonna be able to handle it, so we prepare. I think that's been like a pattern for me in my life is I'm always afraid I'm not going to be able to do something well enough or good enough. And so like I overcompensate that for like over preparing. But there's some things in life you just can't prepare for. And the other problem is that worst case scenario stuff is so exhausting, right? Because you're playing out all these scenarios in your mind and you're exhausting yourself, like trying to prepare for a thing that probably isn't going to happen. But it's very, like it's very compulsive. It's hard to stop.
Right. And once you've lived through so much, it's really hard for it not to trigger that.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that you said that, like, because you've been through so much. I'm saying that to myself. You've been through so much. And so it's hard not to get fucking triggered.
Right.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I like that a lot. So, I know we have a little bit of time left. If do any other kind of ahas you want to share from the book, I'll share one while you're thinking about what you want to share. I feel like one thing the book just really brought to light, and I kind of already talked about earlier, is just reminding myself that I I think I know what's best for everybody, but I don't. I just don't. And even if I do, that doesn't mean that I should be trying to tell people how to live their lives, because ultimately it's their life to live. Like, and they have to deal with the consequences. That's one thing. Like, I kind of learned a lesson. I learned a lesson. I had a friend who was gonna get married, and he was really having a hard time just like dealing with some anxiety and just like kind of like what I would label as like maybe like cold feet or something. And so my reaction was to be like, I don't know. And you, I'm curious, comment below your thoughts on this, because my reaction was to be like, you can do it. Like, this is good. This person's good for you. Like, you're doing a good thing. And like kind of got him pumped up. And then like eventually, he ended up breaking off the wedding. And it just kind of like made me feel really stupid, because I was like, I thought I knew what was best for this person, right? And so much so that like I encouraged this person to go ahead with this big life decision. And then it ended up, not working out. And I kind of realized, like, I think what I should have done, and comment below your thoughts. I think what I should have done in this situation is been more like asking questions, like, why do you feel anxious? Like, what, concerns are coming up for you? Like, what are the pros and cons that you can think of? Like, and let it be his decision, because then I don't have to feel responsible for when like things end up not working out, right? And that's the catch 22 that the book helped, point out to me, remind me of, is that it's hard not obsessing over other people's problems if you're, codependent or insecure. But it's also hard dealing with their problems, right? And it's very freeing when you can get to that point where you can let it go and say, and just pass the ball back to that person, and be like, hey, that's a hard situation, and I'm totally here to watch you figure it out,
Yeah, it's
And
yours.
it's yes, and it's so freeing. So it's hard dealing with that guilt and stuff of like feeling like you got to rescue everybody, but it's also hard um you know excuse me. It's hard dealing with that guilt of rescuing everybody, but it's so freeing when you can finally just like take it off your plate and be like, oh, actually, that's not something I need to worry about. And then I kind of felt empty for a little while, like and this is kind of like a layered thing. And every time I kind of feel like I get better at it, clear another layer, and I have that like, what do I do when I'm not busy worrying about everybody? I'm like so bored. And then I'm like, oh yeah, I have problems that need fixed. Like, maybe I should look at those.
I think that was a lot of really great insight, and that the fact that you are able to look at that and look at those layers and like gently observe what you're going through is actually really healthy and really awesome that you're able to even do that. Like that's so awesome that you could do that. And I totally agree. It's so hard and it's such a learning experience for all of us. But I mean, yeah, I guess
We're
just
doing
those
it.
layers. Yeah, we're doing it. Yeah.
Layer by layer.
Right,
Oh man.
right.
Yeah, so hit me with any maybe one more, or if you have one or two more things
Yeah.
that you like from the book.
So, one thing that kind of hit me strong was when she was talking about relationships and how a lot of us codependents, closeness was not taught or even allowed in some of our childhood homes, like emotional uh, closeness with people. And I think that one hit me because I was like, oh my gosh, I really feel like that was the case in my personal household. And another one, like a question that she asked, that Melody asked was, are we wanting or needing more emotional intimacy in our relationships, but are we settling for less? And why? Why that is? And that really hit me. Like when I was listening to her book, I almost got the chills when she said that because it really
Yeah.
hit home with me in my life. And just like, wow, what level of intimacy am I giving and receiving? And I feel like that's really a balance that is hard to strike, that giving
Yeah.
and receiving and feeling that way. And then the last one that I thought was really cool was keeping people in their power, being there for them, not playing into or supporting the idea that they need to be different than they are, not supporting the idea that they're helpless or that they can't figure it out. And instead, showing them that they are enough and that they're perfectly capable of overcoming whatever it is that they're going through. I kind of touched on this before, but also listening and validating them and let them live their own lives. Let them make their own choices. Let them pick their own path. Let them experience all the hardships and overcome their own problems and find their own answers. And I think that's really big, because it's that personal freedom, and it's really important. And it's important for every one of us to have that personal freedom of being able to choose. Our sovereign lives are our own, and we should be able to control our own life, and just keeping that in mind of the people around us, like what we would like to have the freedom and what we also give freedom wise in return, really kind of hit me too.
I think that's so beautiful. And it reminds me of like, okay, you have like the helicopter moms, right? Who are just way up in their kids' business and trying to control and micromanage everything and trying to just do everything for that kid. And I think that they're doing that because they don't have their own life, right? They don't have their own autonomy and they don't want to think about it. They don't want to think about how they don't have their own life. And so they're just going to kind of get their needs met through living through their kid, right? And Jordan Peterson calls that the devouring mother, right? And it's funny because it's this whole metaphor of like you can lock your kid in a basement and cover them in bubble wrap and keep them away from harm, but then you're the one that's harming them because you're keeping them from learning to live their life and learning to deal with their problems and learning to deal with the consequences of their problems.
Right. It's like enmeshment. It's enmeshment
Yeah.
trauma of like, you have to like the things I like and do the things I do, and you have to be this pro star athlete like I never was in order for you to receive my full love, which is another conditional love thing.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah, I loved I love that you brought that up. Comment here. I mean, someone is going to drink or not drink. It doesn't have anything to do with you, right? That's a healthy way to look at it. It's not your responsibility. Your friend is going to get married or not get married. It's not your responsibility. Did he ask for your advice or help? I took away from that book not helping others. What I mean is waiting for them to ask for help. That's perfect. I'm glad that you brought that up in the comments here because um it's hard to find that line when you're so used to over helping, right? It's hard to find that line of like, when do I help versus not help? And a good measure is certainly when someone is asking for help. um, that's at least a good sign that they actually even want your help. Because sometimes we assume people want our help. Actually, a lot of times we assume they need our help, even if they don't want it, right? And so someone asking for your help is certainly a good measure. In this example, this person did ask for my help and my advice, but I still look back at it and I think it would have been better for me and this friend had I remained more neutral, because I think it was my bias that like getting married is a good thing because it turned out really good for me, but I don't know how it's going to turn out for this person. And I like, if this person can't feel secure in this decision, this person shouldn't be relying on me to feel secure in it, because I don't want the weight of this relationship on my shoulders, if that makes sense. Yeah. So,
Ask them
oh,
questions to where they can
yeah.
figure it out for themselves. You know what I mean?
Yes. I think the more we can do that, the better friend we become. And it's
Yeah.
hard. It's hard to not just want to rescue people. But
Right?
it is a learning experience. One other thing I wanted to bring up before we close it out is that need to control people. I've seen I've seen it in my son, my older son. So I have a 4-year-old and an 18-month-old. And when my 4-year-old gets really stressed out, he starts bossing around my 18-month-old. Like, you can't play with that toy, or you can't sit on that chair, or you can't do this, or you need to do this. And it's been very eye-opening for me, because it makes me realize like what a powerful coping technique it is to try to control other people, whether it's our kids or our spouse, or in my son's example, his brother. um when we're trying to control other people, it's usually because we have some anxiety or fear or something we are trying to manage, and we're trying to manage it through getting someone else to do something, and that's just not the best way to manage it. And so what's been really helpful for me in my life is, like, if I'm getting worked up, to remind myself, like, okay, what is it that what's really going on? How, if I'm lashing out or something, or getting frustrated over, little things or whatever, like, what am I really upset about? And how can I deal with that appropriately, instead of like trying to micromanage these other areas that like are just not even, maybe not even related. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that control. Oh crap. Oh, the coping mechanism. Sorry, I just remembered. The
Oh, you're
coping
good.
mechanism is it serves you. Your coping mechanisms serve you. It helps you to not only numb out of the thing that you're avoiding and feel some sort of pleasure, but also one thing that I've kind of realized in my life is that my coping mechanisms is a form of me receiving. Because I realized that in my life as a mom of 4 kids, that I'm giving constantly, and I really feel like that giving and receiving is out of balance, and so coping mechanisms, in a way, also serves me because it is my way of receiving something. Is that healthy? I mean, I do think that there is healthy coping mechanisms and there's unhealthy ones, and that's, for you to figure out, but, uh but I guess coping mechanisms in general, that's why we have them, you know, is because we
Right.
receive from them. And so I guess just choosing your coping mechanisms, right? And maybe
And
controlling people isn't the best one.
right, and choosing them instead of just going with the baseline that was given to you, right? Because that's what I saw
Right.
for my mom. I saw the way you cope is by controlling and manipulating people around you. And it's like, yeah, let's choose something better than that. And then also like having compassion, like I was feeling really scared and that's why I used this coping technique, or I was feeling really angry or whatever, having compassion with where you're coming from, but then choosing something better.
Right.
And yeah, we all have a choice, right? Because I am not what's it called when you believe free will doesn't exist? I am not one of those people. I think we have a choice. I choose to believe
Yeah.
that.
Me
Anyway,
too.
cool.
Yeah.
Cool, cool. All right. Well, let's wrap this up. Sadie, thank you for having
Yeah.
the courage to come chat with me on here. For those of you who commented, thank you. I loved your comments so much. I try to do these lives every Tuesday. I get the chance. Fingers crossed that that stays that way, but we'll just see. And if you are liking this channel, please make sure you hit that subscribe button just because it really helps my channel out. If you're interested in financially supporting the channel, I have some extra videos on my Patreon, videos that go more in depth about, my life, my past, but also just other things that I just feel like aren't, maybe public YouTube appropriate. So if you want to check those out, you can donate as little as $5 a month. You can cancel at any time. You can get access to that content by joining Patreon, which is in the link below. So thank you guys for watching this video. Thanks for all your awesome comments. Thank you to Sister Jensen for joining me today. And we will see you guys in the next one. Peace.
Peace.